Hey guys, and welcome to this video on Lilith in the 8th house. If you have Black Moon Lilith in your 8th house in your astrology chart, this video is for you. I'm Cassandra, the Saffron Sage, helping you use astrology to evolve. And we're going to talk about Lilith, we're going to talk about the 8th house, and what it means when it is there. This is a pretty intense placement because the 8th house is a really intense house. Lilith is a very intense placement. I would say this is a prominent Lilith placement because the 8th house themes are very Lilith-like. You know, they're very similar, and in the sense that they are like taboo and not accepted by everyone and not things that you talk about at the dinner table. So just to recap, guys, Lilith was the first lady, the original first lady, who was cast out of the Garden of Eden because she didn't do what Adam wanted, and she had her own desires, and she was supposed to like submit to him. So the theme here is she's punished for not submitting to what he wanted, and wherever we have Lilith in our astrology chart is where we are punished for not submitting to what other people want for us. And it has what they want for us has nothing to do with what we need. You know, our own primal innate desires end up being repressed because other people want us to meet their needs. So now let's talk about the 8th house. The 8th house is the house of sex, death, and other people's money. It is about transformation. It is a house of merging with others. So we merge with others sexually. We merge with others when they pass away. That's actually the other side, is part of the 8th house, that kind of merging. We merge with others when we get married with their finances. And so this house represents all the ways that we break down the wall between us and the other person. It also represents death as a theme. So this doesn't mean like if you have planets here, you're going to die, as much as death will be a theme in your life, or another topic, 8th house topic. So for some people, they'll be interested in the death industry and they'll work in that industry. For other people, they might be in a mediumship and the other side in the occult. Things that are unseen go in this house, things that are hidden. Sexuality, sex work, all that kind of stuff goes here. So you probably won't relate to every single one of those things. If you have 8th house placement, you will probably relate to at least one of them. One person will like be the person who people call when someone dies, and they'll just be there, and people will just need that from them. Another person will be someone who teaches sexuality and empowerment. So it can range for many different things. And another person will be an accountant. So it's a very, very wide-ranging house, the way that it can show up. Now, the way that Lilith shows up here, if you have Lilith in this house, is that you were probably shunned from an early age for doing something, being vulnerable. Because, you know, the 8th house is when we merge with others. And when we merge with others, we are vulnerable and we let ourselves be seen. And so when someone has this placement, either in like childhood or like with their first, maybe with their first like sexual experience, or, you know, really romantic, like, because okay, the 8th house is sex, but it's not all sex. Some sex goes in the 5th house, which is like the fun dating kind. The 8th house is the, we're really intimate and connected and we know each other really, really well. So it's like people you mash souls with. When you mash souls with someone, you're doing an 8th house activity. So what happens with people with Lilith here is they have a time where they mash souls with someone, and that someone doesn't accept them, that someone rejects them. For doing something that they're very, very vulnerable in the moment. So this can be sex. It can also just be like sharing deeply how you feel with someone, or bonding with someone on a really, really deep level. Even a friend sometimes can be part of this, and then having that person reject you once they learn something about you, you know, once they get a certain level of closeness, and then you tend to take on that rejection and put up some fear. So there's almost guaranteed to be trust issues for people with Lilith here, and sometimes it's because like the people they were supposed to learn that from, they didn't get it. Like, so people who had family members who were abusive sometimes will have Lilith here. Not always. Not always. But that's one example where you couldn't trust when you were supposed to be forming that ability to bond. And then that ability to bond gets, you know, you naturally put up walls and you don't want to trust people because you know how much you will get hurt if you do. And you have experienced that tells you that. So that's one way this Lilith can show up. Let me look at my notes, you guys. It's usually parents for this one. So the way to heal, and sometimes it's with a partner, and then sometimes you'll have partners who mirror that, where you can't really be yourself with them. You have to be sort of superficial in order to get by in a relationship. And sometimes that's because that fear, that challenge with trust gets sort of imprinted so early that it's so hard to open up and start to trust with this placement. So the way to heal this placement is intimacy and trust building, to find people you can trust, to slowly build bonds with them, to learn, if there's a wound, to sometimes people with trust issues will actually have the opposite problem, where they trust anyone and they let anyone in. And then they have to learn kind of the hard way, after getting hurt several times, that you shouldn't let anyone in, how to discern who gets in and who doesn't get in. So that's another way this can show up. But the healing path is accepting the risk of being seen as who you truly are, and getting so okay with yourself that risk isn't terrifying, and slowly building up to that. Learning when to merge with others and when not to. Learning how to trust someone a little until you know that you can trust them a lot. And then, the real healing is knowing that none of us really can trust anything. And I know that sounds morbid, but the reality is that there is a limit to what people can do for us. There is a limit to how much we can depend on from life versus just going with it. There is a limit to what we can even trust. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's accepting that risk is inherent in life. Risk is inherent in life. And that if we're not risking, we're not really, really living. And instead of seeing those risks that we are supposed to be taking, like the real normal human risks, like getting into relationships and risking that the relationship ends. Okay, so that's a good example of something that this is a normal risk that most humans probably should be taking, and someone with severe trust issues might not. But the way to solve the trust issue isn't to find the person that we can trust with anything, because if we really are putting that much trust on a person, we can't, no one can really live up to that. So really examining our own need for trust and our own, what we actually need, and getting to a place where if someone breaks your trust, it doesn't destroy you, because that's part of life. Part of life is being lied to sometimes, and it's up to us to know, how do I tell if this person is lying or not? And to also be able to be in a situation where maybe someone isn't everything to us, but still be able to accept them as they are. So that's part of this thing. That's part of this Lilith, is being able to accept people as they are and not need them to be everything, and recognize when we are doing that, if we do that, that can be part of the healing process. It is possible with this Lilith placement to trust. It is not an easy process, because wherever we have Lilith, again, we're shunned for that. We're shunned for being open or being vulnerable, or our sexuality, and it can be really, really hard to open that back up again. So it is a challenge, but it can be overcome. So that's what I want you to really take away from this video. And keep in mind, this Lilith can show up in different ways. Remember, it can show up as being a mortician and having people be like, whoa, that's so weird, right? But it's likely that trust, merging with others, and sexuality, those topics are things that people have rejected you for at some point in your life. And that's a thing you'll have to deal with. And so another thing too with Lilith in the 8th is that you could really give off a certain vibe that is slightly triggering to people. You could give off a very, very sexual vibe with this placement. And I don't personally think that's a bad thing, but you could have situations where you are mistaken for a prostitute. You can have situations where people will sexualize you when you don't necessarily, you're not doing anything to try to inspire that that reaction from people. But because Lilith is here, it's just a very sexual placement. And so people respond to that in different ways, right? Some people are going to respond to that by being flirty with you, or just seeing you as someone to flirt with, or whatever, you know, like in a more positive way, I would say. There's another way though that people can react to this, and they'll want to repress that side of you. They'll want to tell you not to dress like that, or not to wear dark eyeliner, or you know, whatever it is that they can see, that they can pick apart, that is you expressing your natural sexual self-expression, whether it is overt or not, right? You could just be wearing a regular ass t-shirt with this placement, and someone will be like, you shouldn't wear that, or something, you know? So it's, you're getting rejected for how you naturally express your sexuality. That's another way this can show up. So that is what I have for Lilith in the 8th house. Let me know in a comment below, you guys, if you relate to this. This is definitely a prominent Lilith, so you'll have to deal with those Lilith themes in your life. And you can also book a private reading by clicking the link below. I'm doing a sale through the 27th, so be sure to get in on that if you want to know more about your chart and, you know, the patterns and themes that show up in your life. Also, make sure that you go watch the other videos I did on Lilith. I did a series on Lilith through the signs. If you haven't yet seen those, be sure to check out what sign your Lilith placement is in, because the sign tells you what, and like kind of how, really how the energy is expressed, and the house tells you what area of life it's going to show up in. So that's what we did in this one. So I hope this was helpful, and I will see you guys in the next video.